Arizona has become a front line in the fight against cartel power, and a recent DEA operation there struck directly at the infrastructure that keeps the drug trade alive. For decades, Arizona has been one of the cartel's most valuable entry points. Its vast desert stretches, long highways, and heavily trafficked ports of entry make it a pressure point for cartel logistics. At the center of it all stands the Sinaloa cartel, which the DEA has described as the single greatest drug threat to the state. From hidden desert trails to tractor trailers on interstates, Arizona has been an artery through which fentanyl pills, meth, heroin, and cocaine pour into the U.S. every day. These shipments are not scattered. They are orchestrated by gatekeepers, trusted cartel members who control the flow of narcotics across the border. The DEA's latest operation in Arizona did not just target drug shipments. It went after the cartel's command posts, the gatekeepers who control the flow of drugs across the border. This initiative, named Project Portero, was designed to dismantle the operatives who manage smuggling corridors, sever the pipelines of fentanyl, methamphetamine, and cocaine heading into the United States, and shut down the backflow of firearms and cash that fuels cartel power in Mexico. By taking down the gatekeepers, the DEA struck at the control center of cartel operations, breaking apart the system from its nerve endings outward. This DEA strike was different not because of the number of arrests or the size of the seizures, but because of its target. For years, law enforcement focused on foot soldiers and street distributors, cutting off the visible ends of a cartel while leaving its core intact. Project Portero flipped that approach. Instead of chasing expendable dealers, agents focused on the gatekeepers who control the corridors where drugs, weapons, and cash cross the US-Mexico border. These gatekeepers were not the kingpins, but they were the lifeblood of the operation. By dismantling them, the DEA aimed straight at the cartel's command and control system, striking at the choke points that kept the empire running. The gatekeepers hold unique power. They are the ones who decide when shipments move, how trucks are loaded, which stash houses are used, and which routes are safe. Without them, the system falters. Striking at this level was a strategic choice. By removing the coordinators, the DEA aimed to cripple both the cartel's logistics and the aura of invulnerability that it relied on. The DEA's approach was a model for systemic dismantling. Cartels have always been resilient, regrowing after arrests and reorganizing after seizures. But they cannot easily replace gatekeepers who understand the corridors, command loyalty, and manage logistics at scale. Removing them slows the machine in a way that mass arrests never could. It creates bottlenecks, confusion, and power struggles. Each fallen gatekeeper becomes a fracture point in the cartel's chain of command. On the ground, the seizures spoke louder than words.
Before we get to that, I need your help. I'm trying to hit 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I need your help. So I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe and help me out.
Federal raids netted massive quantities of fentanyl pills, cocaine bricks, heroin packages, and methamphetamine shipments. Each seizure represented millions in lost revenue for the cartel and thousands of potential overdoses prevented in American communities. The drugs were intercepted in cars, homes, desert stash sites, and warehouses, proving that the cartel's network was sprawling and sophisticated. Yet, for every ton seized, it was the arrest of a key gatekeeper that mattered most, because it prevented future shipments from ever leaving the ground. What set this operation apart was not only the focus, but also the public exposure. The DEA chose to publicly expose the gatekeepers, putting their names and faces into the spotlight. These men thrived on intimidation, whisper networks, and a myth of untouchability. By broadcasting their arrests, staging press conferences, and releasing mugshots, the DEA turned their secrecy into public humiliation. This was as much a weapon as handcuffs. It signaled that no role was safe, no corridor immune, and no operative beyond reach. This public exposure carried symbolic weight for communities long terrorized by cartel intimidation. For rivals within the cartel, it sowed fear and doubt. The humiliation was deliberate. Cartels build their reputation on the perception of invincibility. When the gatekeepers fall in such a visible way, their aura of power cracks. Fear shifts. Instead of communities fearing the cartel, lower-level operatives begin fearing law enforcement. Instead of recruits seeing the cartel as a path to power, they see it as a path to public disgrace and prison. By using transparency as a weapon, the DEA aimed not just to disrupt operations, but to erode the cartel's influence itself. The arrests were followed by media announcements and official statements crafted to amplify the blow. DEA Administrator Terrence Cole emphasized that this was not just another operation, it was a turning point. His words reinforced the narrative. The cartel's leadership is vulnerable, the gatekeepers are not untouchable, and law enforcement is relentless. Every headline was part of the operation. Every broadcast extended the reach of the strike beyond the corridors into the psychological battlefield where power is maintained. A crucial piece of Project Portero was intensified binational cooperation. For years, mistrust and bureaucracy had hampered collaboration between U.S. and Mexican authorities. Project Portero marked a shift. Intelligence was shared across borders in real time. Mexican forces trained with U.S. agents, learning to coordinate raids, track communications, and manage complex investigations. Operations on one side of the border mirrored actions on the other, leaving gatekeepers no safe refuge. This wasn't just law enforcement. It was diplomacy, strategy, and pressure rolled into one. The Mexican government's cooperation was critical. Too often, cartel figures evaded justice by retreating into the protection of corrupt officials or fragmented jurisdictions. This time, cross-border coordination closed the escape routes. Arrests in the U.S. were matched with arrests in Mexico. Seized cash in one country led to raids in the other. Every move was mirrored, ensuring that when the net tightened, it tightened everywhere at once. This approach reflects lessons learned from past failures. For years, U.S. interdiction resembled a cycle. Seizures celebrated, cartels adapting, shipments resuming. Project Portero aims to break that cycle by replacing isolated victories with systemic dismantling. The operation also highlighted how modern enforcement uses perception as much as prosecution. Cartel members operate in a culture of fear and prestige. Gatekeepers are seen as untouchable middlemen who move freely between Mexico and the U.S. By publicly taking them down, the DEA altered that perception. The message was sharp. Power no longer guarantees safety, and visibility now brings vulnerability. Every gatekeeper watching from the shadows saw his own face in the headlines. Project Portero is significant because it represents a shift towards systemic dismantling. The cartel lost operatives, but more importantly, it lost its aura.
Before we get to that, I need your help. I'm trying to hit 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I need your help. So I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe and help me out.
Terrence Cole's declaration of a new era was not just words. It was a marker that the fight against cartels has entered a phase where the goal is not just disruption, but dismantling. What investigators uncovered was not a single stash or shipment, but a complex network of cartel-linked stash houses, desert drop points, and smuggling tunnels that formed the backbone of trafficking in the Southwest. By tearing into these systems, authorities didn't just seize drugs. They dismantled critical nodes of the Sinaloa cartel's supply chain and exposed how deeply entrenched its logistics had become inside U.S. territory. The contradiction was chilling. Ordinary houses with curtains drawn, desert sand hiding buried caches, and tunnels engineered with the sophistication of military infrastructure. This is how the Sinaloa cartel operates, embedding itself in plain sight. And when the DEA stormed these locations, the scale of what they found shocked even seasoned investigators. Inside Phoenix and Glendale stash houses, agents seized over 13 kilograms of fentanyl pills, 72 pounds of meth, several pounds of heroin and cocaine, firearms, and stacks of U.S. currency worth hundreds of thousands. Each pill represented a potential overdose. Each pound of meth symbolized months of addiction for entire communities. The firearms represented the violence cartels were willing to unleash to protect their trade. These were not abstract numbers. They were the raw materials of destruction, piled up inside suburban houses, sitting just a wall away from families who had no idea that cartel infrastructure was operating next door. The desert itself had become a trafficking weapon. Remote drop points in Arizona served as meeting zones where smugglers moved shipments from one set of couriers to another. Vehicles disguised as family SUVs or backpackers carrying drug-laden packs crossed rough terrain that border patrols struggled to monitor. The DEA's actions didn't just disrupt supply, they prevented devastation that might have unfolded across countless American families. This was a targeted, precise solution. By seizing firearms, including ghost guns and switch-modified weapons, they stripped traffickers of their muscle. By taking down vehicles used for trafficking, they removed the arteries that carried shipments from stash to street. By capturing coordinators inside Phoenix and Glendale, they didn't just arrest runners, they cut out the management responsible for orchestrating the smuggling chain. Every node taken down forced the cartel to recalibrate, weakening its grip on Arizona's corridors. For residents of Arizona, this is not a distant problem. The stash house could be next door. The desert drop point could be near a hiking trail. The tunnel could be beneath a familiar street. The sense of urgency is real. Every pill that slips through can kill. The raids in Arizona were not just victories. They were warnings. The clock is always ticking, and every day without action strengthens cartel networks. The Sinaloa cartel doesn't just rely on one method. It layers them. Stash houses supply urban areas. Desert drop points move shipments through remote corridors. Tunnels bypass barriers altogether. Together, they form a logistical machine designed to withstand law enforcement pressure. By targeting each component, the DEA exposed the blueprint of cartel strategy in Arizona. Diversify methods, decentralize storage, and hide in plain sight. The Arizona strike is not an isolated action. It is a deliberate move within a much larger design, a coordinated blueprint aimed at dismantling cartel activity across the entire southwest border. The DEA, backed by Homeland Security and federal task forces, has shifted its approach from chasing individual smugglers to tearing apart the command and control structures that manage entire smuggling corridors. This initiative represents a turning point, a whole-of-government offensive designed to cripple the gatekeepers who move drugs, weapons, and money between Mexico and the United States. Project Portero exists to dismantle those levers methodically, using intelligence, international cooperation, and the force of joint prosecution. The Arizona strike is a proof of concept. It shows how interdiction is no longer a patchwork of seizures and arrests, but a systematic campaign. Each strike is one tile in a mosaic designed to expose and dismantle the infrastructure of smuggling. The message is clear. Every corridor, every gatekeeper, every flow of narcotics is being mapped and targeted. The blueprint is no accident. It is the result of years of lessons learned. Fragmented enforcement creates gaps, and cartels thrive in those gaps. A synchronized, multi-agency, multi-state effort, by contrast, denies them oxygen. The Arizona strike demonstrates how the blueprint functions. It targeted cartel gatekeepers, the individuals who control and safeguard smuggling corridors along the southwest border. These corridors are not random dirt paths. They are billion-dollar arteries carved into desert terrain, used to funnel meth, fentanyl, heroin, cocaine, weapons, and illicit cash. To strike the gatekeepers is to strike the nerve center. By cutting their control, law enforcement disrupts the flow of drugs before they ever reach American cities, while also dismantling the command structure that sustains cartel violence. Project Portero is the centerpiece of this design. It emphasizes binational collaboration with Mexican counterparts, acknowledging that cartel operations do not respect borders. Joint training, intelligence sharing, and coordinated task forces with Mexican investigators ensure that when a smuggling route is hit in Arizona, its counterpart network in Sonora or Michoacan feels the blow. This is not symbolism. It is a recognition that cartels are structured like multinational corporations. To dismantle them, law enforcement must be equally international, equally organized, and equally relentless. Project Portero represents that shift from piecemeal enforcement to synchronized disruption. The Arizona strike reflects this emphasis, not just hitting smuggling routes, but also mapping out the opioid flows embedded within them. For communities, the stakes could not be higher. Every truckload of meth or fentanyl stopped at the border translates into thousands of potential overdoses prevented. Every gatekeeper removed is one less architect of cartel violence overseeing who lives and who dies on smuggling routes. Authorities argue that the payoff outweighs the risks. By conducting strikes as part of a synchronized blueprint, the U.S. minimizes retaliation opportunities. When multiple nodes are hit at once, routes, couriers, financiers, the cartels have less room to counterattack or regroup. This is why the Arizona strike is so important. It is not just a raid, it is one move in a multi-state chess match designed to leave cartels with no good options. The lesson of past decades is clear. Partial disruption fuels adaptation, but systemic disruption forces collapse. The Arizona operation also exposes how deeply cartel activity has penetrated beyond drugs. The blueprint explicitly targets weapons trafficking and illicit finance alongside narcotics. Guns flowing south, armed cartel enforcers, while bulk cash smuggled north launders profits back into the criminal economy. By treating these as interconnected threads of one web, law enforcement avoids the trap of whack-a-mole enforcement. The blueprint aims for total disruption, removing the drugs, the money, the weapons, and the leadership simultaneously. The DEA's recent operation that dismantled a key cartel hub in Arizona is a seismic shift in how law enforcement maps and disrupts cartel dynamics. The arrests and seizures provided intelligence that reshapes how agencies understand the balance of power within Mexico's most dangerous organizations. For law enforcement, this is a goldmine. Instead of chasing shadows, agencies now have direct access to maps of cartel infrastructure, including how shipments were staged, where they were funneled, and who coordinated the flow. Every piece of intelligence is a thread, and when pulled, it unravels layers of hidden relationships that expose command hierarchies and rivalries. This is why dismantling a hub matters more than arresting dozens of smugglers. It tears open the black box of cartel logistics. The fallout for the cartels themselves is immediate and destabilizing. Factions like Los Chapitos and El Mayo, already locked in a delicate balance of control inside the Sinaloa cartel, now face the sudden loss of a vital U.S. corridor. With the Arizona hub compromised, leaders must either adapt or risk ceding ground to rivals. Relocating operations is not simple. It requires new alliances, unfamiliar routes, and the risk of exposure during transition. Every move creates vulnerabilities, and those vulnerabilities are precisely what the DEA can now monitor in real time. The strategic advantage for U.S. authorities is not only in dismantling infrastructure, but also in watching how cartels respond. Every adaptation reveals a weakness. If shipments shift toward Texas, surveillance tightens there. If new alliances form with smaller groups, those alliances can be infiltrated. By forcing cartels to move, law enforcement gains visibility into patterns that were once stable and hidden. This is the power of disruption. The enemy reveals itself while scrambling to survive. The DEA's coordination with Mexican authorities on this operation reflects a growing willingness to share intelligence across the border. For too long, joint efforts were hampered by mistrust, corruption, and bureaucratic barriers. This case proves that when intelligence flows both ways, the result is a far more comprehensive mapping of cartel activity. Surveillance in Arizona ties directly into raids in Sonora. Arrests in Mexico validate leads in Arizona. The cross-border puzzle begins to form a clearer picture. This matters because cartels operate seamlessly across nations, and unless enforcement does the same, they remain one step ahead. The Arizona action is evidence that agencies are finally closing that gap. For cartels, the psychological blow may be even greater than the material losses. Hubs like Arizona were considered secure, reinforced by corruption, secrecy, and compartmentalization. When law enforcement pierces that veil, it creates paranoia. Who leaked information? Who is cooperating with authorities? Which cell is compromised? Paranoia corrodes trust, and trust is the glue that holds sprawling criminal networks together. The Arizona case plants seeds of doubt that can fester into fractures, weakening the cartel from within without a single shot fired. This operation validates years of calls for intelligence-driven strategies. Experts have long argued that fighting cartels requires more than seizures and arrests. It requires dismantling networks. Arizona proves that when agencies commit to this approach, they not only remove drugs from circulation, but also reshape the operational map of organized crime. It is a demonstration that strategy can outpace brute force, and that cartels, no matter how powerful, are not immune to coordinated intelligence campaigns. The closure of this story brings us to the broader lesson. Disruption is power. By dismantling the Arizona hub, the DEA did not just stop a flow of drugs, it set off a chain reaction that ripples through cartel hierarchies, alliances, and rivalries. It forced adaptation, exposed vulnerabilities, and handed law enforcement the intelligence needed to anticipate future moves. For communities across the United States, it represents hope that the drug war can be fought smarter, not just harder. And for cartels, it is a reminder that their control is not unshakable. The Arizona hub has fallen, and with it, the myth of invulnerability. The next phase of the fight will be defined not by how cartels adapt, but by how effectively law enforcement exploits every crack revealed in the wake of disruption. This takedown was just the start. The fight isn't finished. On your screen is the next video. Click the video, it opens right away, and you'll see the cartels crushed even harder.